The Death Mage Who Doesn't Want a Fourth Time. Chapter 47. Let's launch things with a high amount of bloodthirst. The bathhouse was currently the only functional facility in the royal castle of Talosheim. As there was no functioning national government, this was the only facility of any use. That was a good bath. The massage golems that the king made for us were good, too, weren't they? Really? I found the jacuzzi thing that made bubbles come out to be better. The ghouls, who had only ever bathed in cold water before coming to Talosheim, were totally engrossed in submerging themselves in hot water. There were some golem products that Vandaloo had come up with, but the hot baths seemed to be the most pleasurable thing after all. Oh, yes, have you heard? The rumors that Chief Taria has been summoned into the king's bedroom every day recently. I've heard about it, but doesn't he just want her company? The king is only 4 years old, after all. I heard that he gets lonely easily, too. And she's not the chief anymore. She's the foreman, right? That's right, but I'm more used to calling her chief. As the two ghoul women walked along during their conversation, Taria, the subject of their discussion, ran across in front of them. Huh? Foreman? Immediately afterwards, Vandaloo passed across them as well. For some reason, he was crawling across the ceiling silently using all 4 limbs. As the two were rendered speechless at the sight of the Ghoul King, Taria came back. She had been captured by Vandaloo. No, please let me go for tonight, Taria wailed. No, we have to test the catapult's firing tomorrow, so let's do 10 more today. Vandaloo walked away, holding the teary-eyed Taria in the air with telekinesis. Watching him leave, the 2 ghoul women swallowed before speaking again. It's not because he's lonely? Vandaloo was next to Taria, who was lying in an unladylike spread-eagle position while breathing wildly. The youth transformation will be complete in a few more days, so let's do our best. Seemingly exhausted and unable to get up, Taria let out a strange sound. Taria had experienced many things in the past, but the youth transformation caused sensations she had never felt before to run through her entire body. The unpleasant feeling of something foreign crawling around inside her body, and the pleasure of having her entire body massaged, causing her muscles' tension to vanish. She was in an incomprehensible state where her body was full of energy, but at the same time it felt as if she had just run a marathon. The fact that she had learned a secret that was only between Vandaloo and Zadiris up until now made her feel younger as well. These were only good things for Taria, but... It's true that I don't get tired easily, run out of breath, or get blurry eyes anymore, and my back no longer hurts, but... Taria's aging had progressed further than Vandaloo had initially thought. As to be expected of someone over 260 years old. Should we reverse another 10 years of age? Let me go for tonight. The pure-breed vampires who only gathered together once every few millennia had assembled in one of the numerous meeting places for the vampires who worshipped Hihiryushukaka, the evil god of joyful life. Something that hadn't happened for tens of thousands of years was taking place. A crooked, 7-pointed star had been drawn on the floor using special freshly drained blood. The 3 pure-breed vampires raised their arms toward the center of this star, curling their hands into fists. I, Ternesia, pour my sacred blood. A drop of blood fell from in between Ternesia's fingers. Her eyes were shining like those of a child about to open a box containing a present.
"I, Gubaman, pour my sacred blood."
Gubaman, an old man who looked like a withered tree, rolled his large eyes. A drop of blood fell from in between his fingers as well. His unknown desires were showing unpleasantly in his eyes. "I, Burkine, pour my sacred blood." And then red blood also fell from Burkine's white hand. His eyes were ominously empty. His lips, that normally gave a gentlemanly smile, were pressed together tightly as if he were enduring something unpleasant. These three pure-breed vampires gathered in one place, and cooperating to carry out a task was something that had not happened in tens of thousands of years. A single pure-breed vampire possessed enough power to defeat a party of adventurers made up of superhuman A-class adventurers alone. As well as acting as the rulers of this vampire community, they had received the divine protection of Hihiryushukaka, the god of joyful life, and were equivalent to being his subordinate gods. Just what kind of ritual were they carrying out?
"It seems that the ritual has failed. That damn Serkrent, has he betrayed us?"
Gubaman looked at the seven-pointed star that showed no response whatsoever and raised the ends of his lips in a smile, exposing his pointed fangs. "Well, then, next is Eleonora. Get on with it." "Yes." As Ternesia pressed Burkine to perform the next step, he took an unconscious child from a noble-born vampire who had been waiting nearby and cut off its head, using the side of his hand as a blade. Blood gushed onto the floor, glowing mysteriously and crawling around as if alive to form another seven-pointed star. The three of them each gave a drop of their blood as they had done earlier. However, the result was the same. Nothing happened. "It seems that Eleonora has betrayed us as well."
"If they were dead, they would have been revived here as undead after all."
This ritual was one that summoned the souls of dead noble-born vampires and resurrected them as undead. It required the decapitation of a child born to a woman who had only ever known one man, and all three of the pure-breed vampires needed to contribute a drop of their own blood to the seven-pointed triangle drawn with that child's blood. Even though this ritual would revive a noble-born vampire as an undead, the resulting undead would be vastly weaker than the live vampire, so it was hardly worth the trouble. The reason this ritual was being carried out was because a major incident had occurred a month ago.
"Slay the damn pair born between the subordinate vampire Valen and the dark elf Darcia."
That was the divine message that had recently been given to the pure-breed vampires by Hihiryushukaka, the evil god of joyful life. They had given the task of slaying the Dhampir in question to Serkrent and Eleonora around a year ago. As vampires' sense of time was different from that of humans, they had thought that perhaps Serkrent and Eleonora were having some difficulty with the task, so it hadn't really occurred to them that they should investigate the situation. As the problematic pure-breed vampires who worshipped Vita had shown no signs of movement, there hadn't been anything to get impatient about either. However, things changed when the evil god sent the divine message directly. Even though the evil god had given the pure-breed vampires his divine protection, it was unusual for him to send them a divine message. The evil god had given them a direct order to slay the Dhampir. It was a significant enough event that even Gubaman, who normally refrained from attending these meetings, had stopped admiring his collection to come out here. They had then tried to contact Eleonora and the others who had been sent to slay the Dampier, but it was already too late. That was why this ritual had been carried out. If they had killed the Dampier but lost their lives in the process, they would be revived as undead and be able to report the fact. If they could not be revived, it would be clear that they had betrayed the vampires. "It seems that we've been underestimating this Dampier. Perhaps he has captured his would-be assassins alive and is now tormenting them. But either way, they have failed."
Serkrent was not a particularly excellent individual, but he was still a moderately useful man. If the Dampier had made him betray us, he must possess a considerable amount of power.
Gubamon nodded in response to Turnesia's words, excited about the fact that his subordinate might have betrayed him. Either the Dampier had prepared something that forced Serkrent to obey him, even if it made his own parent and every noble-born and subordinate vampire his enemy, or he was powerful enough to convince Serkrent that doing so was the better choice.
The corpse of such a Dampier is something I would like to acquire. I cannot help but be excited by the thoughts of what kind of undead I will turn him into.
For Gubamon, who made it his life's hobby to collect the corpses of heroes and use them to create undead, it appeared that the evil god of joyful life had given him an indication as to which corpse should be added to his collection next. A Dampier so dangerous that the evil god personally wished for his demise? Wouldn't that be an even more valuable addition than some A-class adventurer? It was unclear as to what made him so dangerous, or perhaps he had simply incurred the evil god's wrath, but he had caught Hihid Yushukaka's attention. "Do your best, then. I'm not really interested." "No, I am a little. That Dampier was leading hundreds of ghouls, wasn't he? Making undead from ghouls sounds interesting." Turnesia was also interested in creating undead, but she did so to create works of art. Unlike Gubamon, she wasn't particularly concerned with the strength and fame of the materials used to create the undead. The theme of her creations in the past few centuries had been families, so she had no interest in a Dampier whose father had already been disposed of and whose mother had been burned at the stake. But it was possible that the gray-brown skin of the ghouls would look attractive once they were turned into undead. That was what her twisted inspiration was whispering to her. And as for Berkheim, "Shit," he quietly whispered a single word. Hearing a word that Berkheim wouldn't utter with his usual demeanor, the noble-born vampires who had been standing by with empty cages in their hands opened their eyes wide in surprise. "Berkheim-sama!" Berkheim unconsciously seized the head of the noble-born vampire who had spoken his name and raised this thing into the air. "Berkheim-sama, whatever are you doing?" Berkheim swung the panicking thing around wildly.
"Damn it, my Eleonora, my toy that I chose from among dozens of humans. He stole her away from me, that accursed Dampier."
Being shaken in every direction, the thing in his hand struck the floors and walls numerous times, causing various pieces to break off and scatter everywhere.
"I was going to toy with her for centuries to come. I was going to convince her that she was special, make her feel conceited, and then break her by scraping off her flesh piece by piece. How unfair of him to take her from me before I could get to the good part! That damned, accursed, unforgivable Dampier!"
"What? Berkheim-sama! Please stop, Berkheim-sama! What is the... Berkheim-sama has gone mad! Run away! Run away!
No!
Berkheim went into a frenzy with disheveled hair, bloodshot eyes, and a foaming mouth. His appearance was no longer that of a young nobleman or even that of an angry beast, but that of a broken madman. He swung his fist wildly, destroying a pillar that had barely avoided destruction up until now, and then stopped, breathing heavily with his shoulders heaving. He looked up into the sky to see the beautiful blue-white glow of the moon and the sparkling stars that accompanied it. As Berkheim threw away the thing, the head of the noble-born vampire, which was already in a poor enough state to make it impossible to tell whether it was even a man or a woman, he calmly spoke to Ternisia and Gubamon as if nothing happened. "So, that brings up the question of what we will do next, Ternisia. Do you have any ideas?" He took a silk handkerchief from his breast pocket, cleaned his mouth and hands with it, and quickly adjusted his hair with his fingers. "Ah, you're back. It didn't last very long this time, did it?"
"The last time you were in that state for days. I was considering whether Ternisia and I needed to stop you."
My apologies. Berkheim had completely reverted to his usual self, but his surroundings were in a pitiful state. The meeting chamber that had previously looked as if it were from inside a large mansion of a nobleman now had turned into a mountain of rubble, other than two circular areas roughly a meter wide around Gubamon and Ternisia. Blood and severed limbs sprawled over the rubble. Heads and fragments of heads littered the ground. Half of the noble-born vampires and the majority of subordinate vampires had been turned into silent corpses. "Well, it's fine. I thought that this would happen, so I didn't bring my servants to today's meeting, other than subordinate vampires to fill out the numbers."
"Ha ha ha! Well done! All of my noble-born vampires were present today."
"I have done a terrible thing. How many of them did I crush?"
Don't worry. I was thinking of cutting down those that were below average, so I don't need to end up with another individual like Circrant. You have merely made the selection for me by cutting down those who could not survive your temper."
"I see. How terrible of you to use me like that. By the way, why are you asking me? I did say that I'm interested, but I'd be happy as long as I can skin the ghouls when the Dhampir is dead. It's simple. First, Gubamon's subordinate, Circrant, then Eleonora. So you're next, aren't you? You're right. I suppose I won't look very good if I don't make any moves." Ternisia took a moment to think. "Well, then, I suppose we can mobilize the army. There's a guy in the Amid Empire army that wants eternal life. A convenient guy who will do anything we tell him as long as we turn him into a vampire. We'll exert our influence on him and a few other noble families and high officials. If we do that, we should be able to set the army after the Dhampir in about 2 years. An average noble-born vampire, another noble-born who was quite exceptional for her age, and a few dozen subordinate vampires, was it? The Dhampir disposed of that many of our forces. I didn't know what methods he used to fight them, but it was enough for the evil god himself to send a divine message. I'm sure he used a very abnormal method. So let's try attacking with numbers. Things will surely go well if we use thousands of soldiers, knights, adventurers, and the high priest that burned his mother at the stake. If we hide our subordinates among such an army, there will be no chance for him at all. 100 noble-born vampires would be too many, but a few dozen should be enough. Can you give me that information? I'm sure those who worship Vita can't make use of it if I break it with my own hands once I'm finished with it. I do not mind, said Berkheim in response to Turnesia's request. It was information that the guys worshipping Vita are fairly likely to know anyway.
Yes, if Turnesia destroys it, we can be certain. But it is a serious matter to mobilize the army. You were quite poor at utilizing humans, were you not?
What? You don't consider yourself good at it either, do you?
That is right. I'm also poor at using them.
In any case, it seems that you have an idea. I want you to let me know when your plan begins to progress. Now that our God has given us a divine message, there is a need for us to cooperate.
That is right. Yushukaka-sama's punishment would take a toll on our bodies after all.
The three of them laughed in agreement as other vampires who had somehow managed to survive staggered to their feet, and then they began the journey to the next meeting location. They were all thinking the same thing about Yushukaka's divine message. Why would the evil god, the only existence who certainly possessed greater power than them, make the effort to send a divine message instructing them to kill the Dhampir? For him to have done that meant that Ryushukaka's attention had been drawn to the Dhampir, a Dhampir that was not one of his followers. In other words, couldn't this be a sign that the Dhampir possessed something that would be a threat to Ryushukaka? Some kind of power or information? In that case, if we could somehow get our hands on it, wouldn't it be possible to rule and conquer the evil god himself? Yushukaka knew that the pure-breed vampires would think this. It was only natural. They were only applying the teachings that he himself had given them. That was why Yushukaka had given them no information regarding Vandaloo in his divine message. A human-sized boulder flew from the catapult with a whoosh. The boulder fell accurately on top of a wooden target set up in the firing area, destroying it. Bastia, who was sitting in a chair with a monster leather parasol protecting her from the sun, much like a human lady, let out a sigh of amazement as she rubbed her expanding abdomen. These catapults are amazing. They look very promising. This is still just the test firing phase. This was the response of Vandaloo, who was being thrown into the air by Pavina next to her, but he seemed not entirely unsatisfied. He was generally expressionless, had the eyes of a dead fish, and a flat-toned voice, but once one got accustomed to it, it was possible to tell his emotions from his manner of speech. The slightly more carefree tone of speech he was using now was proof that he was in a good mood. The results of firing with normal projectiles are excellent. Next, I'll begin test firing with the golem projectiles.
Yes, ready!
As Pavina gave this vague order, the catapult moved on its own and prepared to fire. The catapult was essentially a catapult-shaped golem that Vandaloo had created through golem transmutation. It was no ordinary catapult. It possessed arms and wheels made of stone. It was possible to make it load projectiles, take aim, and fire, all on its own. And as Entwood had been used in the construction of its body, it had the sturdiness of metal and excellent resistance to fire.
Fire!
The loyal catapult golem fired the next boulder. It flew through the sky in a trajectory similar to the previous one, but towards a different target, which had wooden dummies lined up around it for some reason, and landed on top of it. and then the projectile let out a groan and stood up. Did the catapult launch a golem? The sight of the projectile turned golem, destroying the wooden dummies around it, took Bestia by surprise. The golem had seemed to have taken some damage from the impact of landing, but it caused no problems in combat, as golems didn't feel pain or anything. This would likely be incredibly effective in real battle. The main weakness of golems was their own slow movement. This method would provide the golems with a way to attack the enemy while removing that weakness. A golem fired at the enemy this way would easily break down the front lines and then run rampant among their front ranks. This would not be an easy attack to deal with.
Yes, and since we might be fighting subordinate vampires, I've put silver plating on its fist and toes.
You've got attention for detail. It's exciting to see.
Thank you, but it seems that the golem projectiles still have room for improvement.
Do they really? It's destroyed all of the wooden dummies set up as enemies. So far as I can see, it's perfect. As Bestia thought this, Vandaloo, who was sharing the vision of the undead insects he had set up nearby, shook his head.
There's one wooden dummy that only has had its legs crushed. Its torso is completely unharmed, even though I ordered the golem to kill, to inflict damage in ways that would be fatal to humans.
It would be impossible for a human to enter a battle with 2 broken legs, unless they were treated first. However, it would be possible for vampires to continue fighting, even with both legs broken. Vandaloo wanted the golems to crush their heads just in case. You've got a high amount of bloodthirst, don't you, Van?
Hi!
Pavina threw Vandaloo directly overhead. It seemed that she had reacted to the word high in Bastia's sentence. She had once done this inside of a room, causing a stain of Vandaloo's nose blood to appear on the ceiling, so she had been forbidden to throw Vandaloo into the air indoors. She seemed to be intent on enjoying herself as much as she could today. Pavina caught Vandaloo as he fell onto her with a smacking sound.
There's a big impact when I land, so please do it more gently. Okay. I'm begging you, I really am. Leaving that aside, I'll be starting the test firing of the special projectiles now.
Vandaloo spoke somewhat lifelessly, and the catapult loaded a large barrel this time. And then it was launched. It drew an arc in the air and then split into 2. What, did it fail? A transparent liquid spilled from within and splashed onto the ground in front of the target.
No, it was quite successful. That was a barrel-shaped golem I made for spreading poison and pathogens among the enemy. After it's launched, it splits at a certain timing and spreads its content in front of the enemy.
Poison?
Yes, it's poison. I've only had water in it just now, though.
Poison and pathogens could be created as long as Vandaloo had the mana for it. He could carry out biological terrorism anywhere, anytime. He did have to be careful not to be affected by his own poisons and pathogens, however. If he was afflicted by a deadly enough poison or disease that was powerful enough to overcome his status effect resistance skill, he would collapse immediately without even being able to cast any spells. Poison and disease, is that all right?
It's more of a problem of what I spread, rather than how I spread it. The undead and golems will be fine, but poison and diseases will affect you and the other ghouls after all.
It was truly a difficult problem to solve. If he was planning to spread disease, it would be best to use pathogens with high infectious capacity. But it would be pointless if Bestia and the others, especially the children with weak immune systems, were to be affected by them. It would be fine if he could use sterilization and disinfect right away, but it was impossible to know what could happen during a battle. So, then, would poison be better after all? But if Vigaro and the other warriors were in the battle, it couldn't be used.
Maybe it will be fine if I use the same components that are in the ghoul's paralyzing venom? I wonder if there are any deadly airborne diseases that are difficult to treat, highly infectious, and only affect humans.
Wait a minute, that's not what I was trying to ask. I'm trying to ask if it's really all right to do that. Our enemies might be humans, right?
Yes, and?
Vandaloo replied as Pavina threw him up and down, slightly more gently than earlier. It seemed that he was still unsure as to why Bastia seemed concerned. No, I'm not going to say I have a problem with killing people either, but won't it cause a problem to kill too many?
It would be problematic to kill more than necessary, wouldn't it?
Vandaloo nodded a few times in agreement. Probably. It was difficult to tell due to him being thrown up and down.
It's fine. I'll be careful not to kill more than necessary, and it's not like these weapons have to be used. Mom wouldn't be happy about it either.
Darcia wasn't a peace advocate in particular. However, she wouldn't approve of a massacre either. She would definitely hate unnecessary murder and try to stop Vandaloo from performing such murder. If he actually did it, she would likely be heartbroken about it afterwards. Bastia was a ghoul who had been raised in a village where she had been taught not to fight with adventurers. It was possible that she felt very reluctant to kill humans because of this. And Vandaloo had no recollection of becoming a murderous fiend. He considered himself to be a normal person. People are creatures with societies, and as long as that is the case, the happiness of human lies in these societies. Vandaloo's objective was to become happy and stay happy. Unnecessary murder would simply be an action that would lead him further from this goal.
That's why I'll try not to kill any more than necessary.
Yeah, you won't kill, you know.
Vandaloo and Pavina made this declaration together, but Vandaloo continued speaking.
But if I need to slaughter every single enemy to protect everyone, I'm going to do it. So don't get angry with me if it comes to that, all right?
You got it?
He wouldn't kill people he didn't have to. However, there was a god and a religion that taught killing every member of their races was justice, and this religion was the official religion of an entire empire. In order to survive in this world, there would be times where he would be forced to kill all of his enemies in order to survive. As Vandaloo told Bastia this, she seemed to get a little haughty. That's a given. If it were necessary to slaughter all of the enemies in order to protect this child and you and all the others, Van, I wouldn't hesitate. I'd gladly swing my axe at them.
What a reliable mother you are.
I am, aren't I? If you ever want to give me my child, let me know, any time.
That will be at least another 10 years from now.
As Vandaloo gave Bastia this response, Pavina gave Vandaloo a particularly large throw towards the sky. Falling from this height would cause quite the impact, so he used flight to float gently in the air. And then he reflected upon the events of the past few months.